fight for the forest. Jim wondered whether he'd read the sign correctly. Deforestation? What would that mean for his woodland friends and himself? The face looking down from the poster looked haunting, and Jim knew that trouble was just around the corner. He was looking at the evidence right in front of him. Trembling and confused, Jim made his way through the forest to the home of Lanny the lion. Lanny may have been the king of the jungle at one time, but a logistical decision made by his owners meant that he had ended up in the forest in England. He'd settled in eventually and was now considered the leader of the animals, as he had the biggest teeth. It took Jim over an hour to calm down and tell Lanny what he had seen, which had cost Lanny a considerable amount in tea and milk. Although tax deductible, he knew he wouldn't be able to claim the whole amount back. Lanny made the decision to alert the rest of the animals in the forest the next day, but he told Jim not to panic them for the moment as EastEnders was on. Leaving Lanny's house, Jim thanked him for the tea and biscuits, which were also going to cost the lion, and made his way back through the forest. His mind couldn't stop thinking about that awful image, and the possible implications of the news, despite having to sit through 30 minutes of a soap. Lanny had done little to calm his nerves, but at least a plan had been made by a responsible animal who had power in his homeland. At 8:30 p.m, Jim and his fearless leader strode out with a message for all who passed. They, in turn, told the rest of the forest, who gathered beneath the crooked palm, another logistical error. Lanny cleared his throat and made his address. "Fellow foresters, we have a big problem that is both urgent and important," proclaimed Lanny, who had seen his fair share of customer service presentations. "The humans are planning to level the forest for unknown reasons, do unknown things to us, and build or dig on the land. Which one is unknown? We need to march to protest this inhumane but completely human travesty before it's too late." Lanny's speech had clearly worried the animals, all of whom were discussing unknowns, but none of whom had seen the poster for themselves. The monkey screeched loudly, making the other animals even more nervous. Lanny looked like he had a lot to say still, but none of the animals were listening at the moment. Finally, Cecil the snake spoke up. "How do we know this is happening?" he replied, listless despite the stereotypes. "Is this just another scam to get us to open our wallets?" The crowd hushed at the comment, mainly because they were quietly checking their wallets hadn't been opened already, but also because they were concerned at how the often overreactive lion would take such a comment. "This has been reported by Jim," declared Lanny, never wavering from his original speech. "He has seen a poster on a tree that has the word deforestation right across the top. We are not looking to pull the wool over your eyes," he added, aware of what his predecessor's actions had led to. "Jim who?" asked the flamingos, sounding less interested than anyone else due to their ongoing attempts to remasculate themselves following the pink feather policy issued to them before man arrived. "Loud Jim the eagle?" "No," countered Lanny. "Quiet Jim." "Oh, sorry," responded the flamingos, still mulling over possible new colours should their requests be taken into consideration. With this information, pamphlets were issued showing their route to march, appropriate dates, and information on what equipment would be needed. Jim was proud to be a big part of this, but was still nervous due to the possibilities for his home. He knew he had done the right thing by going straight to Lanny. The day of the protest arrived. Jim and Lanny headed the queue with all of the animals of the forest behind them, clutching banners and signs and ready to make some real noise in London. They knew it would be a long march, but clogging up the motorways on the way would really put their message across in a massive manner. Finally, Lanny and Jim arrived at Downing Street, ready to meet the Prime Minister. All who had begun or joined the march had weary feet, though they still remained positive. Lanny called for the Prime Minister to come to the gates, which took very little time considering how busy he must have been. The guards would probably declare that Lanny's teeth had rushed the message through. A meeting was held between the lion and his new country's leader, with the former declaring the proposal an outrage, and the latter insisting he knew nothing about it. Keen to win the animals' approval, the Prime Minister agreed to return with the animals to the forest to take a look for himself. It was another long and weary journey, but was ultimately important for a satisfactory conclusion for the animals involved. 1 week had passed before the animals returned home, at which time the Prime Minister was called to visit the forest and see the proposals for himself. A big cheer exploded from the forest as he arrived, and the animals all gathered to hear his verdict on what would become of their habitats. Jim and Lanny were again at the head of the gathering, when suddenly all seemed to go quiet. The silence was only broken by the loud sigh of a clearly agitated Prime Minister, before he left the forest without speaking a single word. Lanny was disappointed, as he now believed that the animals were doomed. But Jim was starting to look a little sheepish. Lanny took a look at the poster for the first time. "Missing," he uttered, again breaking a very uncomfortable silence. "Grey tabby cat. Answers to the name of Mushy P. Call Liz with any information." The Lion was looking more than a little embarrassed as he read out the poster Jim had originally mistaken for the impending doom of his family and peers. Nothing else was said that day. All of the animals spent the afternoon sunbathing and catching up on their reading, while Jim and Lanny had an interesting conversation about the field mouse's ability to read and interpret scary faces on posters. Although the incident seemed to have been brushed under the carpet without countless forms being filled in to avoid similar incidents in the future, all of the animals had subconsciously been given a chance to enjoy their environment and not take too much for granted. Consciously, they all wanted to eat Jim, but that notion was quashed by his sudden association with the former king of the jungle.
I love